So I built a clone of a Silvertone amp, sort of. So this started off as a collaboration. I don't usually do clones, it's not that interesting to me, I'd rather design something, but so somebody wanted a clone of a Silvertone amp, and I forget what this model number is, 14, it's whatever the video is called, so. But unlike a lot of older amps that are collectible and that a lot of people clone all the time, Silvertones are not, this particular amp, a lot of the tubes in it are no longer available. And the same goes with the transformers and everything like that. So I wanted to build something largely based on the circuit. So all the tone circuit is fairly similar, but the power supply and some of the tubes in here have changed. So it's using a GZ34 rectifier, which is common. However, if you were to just drop a GZ34 rectifier in the same circuit, you'd end up with way higher voltage every place else, and then it wouldn't be the same amp. So I used a different transformer to get a lower voltage on the transformer windings, and so the voltage on the circuits is about the same as what it would have been on the original amp, despite having a different rectifier tube on there. And as a result, there's a little bit less compression, but it's fairly similar. I've never actually heard the original amp, to be honest, but I'm assuming it should be fairly similar because the voltages are about the same. Also, there is a tube tremolo on the amp, and the original tube that was on there was a type of preamp pentode that's no longer in stock, so I used an EF86, which is a current production one. And then for the output transformer, I just used a current production one that seemed to match up roughly with the output wattage and where I would expect the impedance to be on there. So I'm going to flip this around, and it's set up the same way as like kind of the original TV setup as the original. The speaker that was in the original is no longer in stock either, so I used a small magnet Jensen Neo speaker on there, which I think is probably about the closest thing that you're going to get to the sound from a new production speaker. Then it has two 12AX7s, and then 6V6s, and then the rectifier over here. And everything over here is set up roughly where the original was, including the jacks in the back. So the first one is just like the original. The circuit's all the same on there. The second one is a little bit hotter. It essentially just has a cathode bypass capacitor. It took me a second there. Capacitor on that one. So there's a little more gain, not hugely different from the original. And then this last one here is to turn on and off the tremolo with a pedal. Flipping around to the front, right over here we have the volume and tone for the first couple of channels. And then, so that's first channel there, second channel there, the tremolo, speed and intensity, and then there's a master volume, which obviously the original didn't have. It's all right. It's somewhat useful. There's not a whole lot of preamp gain in these amps in the first place, so if you turn it down, you're not going to get that much gain. It's there as an option. Doesn't do an awful lot. The last thing was kind of a little thing I tried to throw in, and if I were doing it again, I probably wouldn't. Not because there's anything wrong with it, but it doesn't really do much. It's a voltage. So the original, when they were making Silvertones, they were kind of built to a very low price point, and they used very small capacitors because capacitors were more expensive at the time. And now that capacitors aren't as costly, you can essentially not have as big of a resistor to get the same amount of filtering. So the original Silvertone had fairly low voltages in the preamp sections for a tube amplifier. And more typical amps, more expensive amps would have had higher voltages in there. So essentially what this does is it changes the voltage of the preamp stages from the original to something that's a bit higher voltage, kind of more like the Fenders, Marshalls, Trainers of the era. In practice, I found that it makes virtually no difference. I can't actually hear any difference, so it was a thing to try. If I were building it again, I probably wouldn't do it again, but there's no reason to get rid of it. It doesn't hurt anything. What I actually used, and I had a friend write all this because my handwriting is terrible, it's a piece of floorboard. I was originally going to use a bit of stained poplar wood, and then I managed to destroy the wood in the planing process and found a floorboard and figured, why not? That looks good. So that's how everything is in here and set up and working. And now let's try it. Here we go. My apologies in advance. I'm not much of a guitar player, and I don't want to play anything copyrighted, so get ready for some aimless noodling. We're going to start off with a clean sound from the amp, tremolo off. Here we go. can press here to turn it on, and then we get... all the way down and the intensity all the way up. So I'm going to pull up the speed a little bit here. In fact, let's just pull it up all the way and see how fast we can get this. I don't know how useful that is, but... What if I back off the intensity a little bit? You can find some use for the higher speed tremolo, I think. The gain a little bit here, and this is on the regular channel that's supposed to be just like the original Silvertone, so I'm just gonna pin it, why not? That voltage switch, this is actually, it's been on the whole time. If I pull it back down, this will be just like the original voltages. I don't hear any difference, but it is actually quite a bit of a difference in the voltage on the anodes of the preamp tubes, but... but it exists. It's a feature that's technically available on there. Now I'm going to try flipping over. I'm going to move this to the channel that has a little bit more gain. It's not a huge difference, and it should be slightly brighter too, but it's, anyway, it's something. It's an option. And... So I'm going to pull this down just to give an idea of how it works. So an amp like this, it only has 2 gain stages before the phase inverter, so there isn't an awful lot of gain on there. I think that would work better if you had like some sort of a boost or a, what am I thinking of, an overdrive pedal in front of it. Which is what a lot of people did with older amps at the time because they weren't really designed for high gain the way that a lot of modern amps are. It's a feature that's there as an option, but I think an amp like this you generally just kind of turn the volume up if you want to get a lot of gain. And then back it off a bit when you don't. So anyway, that's the amp as it is. It's an interesting, it was kind of something to try. The one thing that I think I would like a little bit differently was I would alter the circuit to make it a little bit less dark. So the original Silvertones were very dark amps because they were fairly small, and they had very treble-heavy speakers. So to kind of compensate with that, they made a very dark circuit. So now when I made this amp a little bit thicker to get some more low end and used a more modern speaker, it's a little darker than I would generally like an amp to be, and there isn't really any way to dial that out, except for if, like I said, you were using like a boost or an overdrive pedal, like a tube screamer or something. I think that would work very well in front of this, and then you could kind of get that roll down the bass a little bit and get that sound. So anyway, I just finished up with it, so I figured I'd make a little bit of a video. It exists, and there it is, sort of clone of a Silvertone.